Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Visionaries podcast, brought to you by the MIT Center for Real Estate. My name is Michael Khamis. I'm a student in the Master of Science in Real Estate Development program here at MIT. On today's episode, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming MaryAnne Gilmartin. MaryAnne is the founder and chief executive officer of MAG Partners, a New York-based, women-owned real estate development company focused on building vibrant, enduring, and inclusive urban communities. Under her leadership, MAG has designed, built, and managed over 7 million square feet of office, residential, and mixed-use projects, including more than 2,000 units of housing with a combined value exceeding $4.5 billion. The firm's marquee projects include the Ruby, the Mabel, and the Anagram Turtle Bay, each reflecting MAG's commitment to design excellence, sustainability, and community-oriented development across New York City. Before founding MAG Partners in 2018, MaryAnne served as Chief Executive Officer of Four City Renter Companies, where she oversaw an 11 million square foot development portfolio that reshaped the skyline of New York. Her tenure included some of the city's most complex and high-profile projects, such as the Barclays Center, the New York Times Building, New York by Geary, and the redevelopment of Pacific Park, Brooklyn. MaryAnne currently serves on the board of New York Public Radio, as a trustee of the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and as a member of the executive committee of the Real Estate Board of New York. She's also served on the board of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. Widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in urban development, MaryAnne is known for her forward-thinking approach to city building, combining design excellence, civic partnership, and social impact. Her work continues to redefine what it means to create value in real estate, not just through buildings, but through the communities they serve. MaryAnne, welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
MaryAnne, you've often said that MAG Partners was built around conviction, that you wanted to prove that a development firm could be both principled and profitable, mission-driven, and market savvy. And after decades at the helm of Four City Renter Companies, you took a leap of faith and created something that was entirely your own. What inspired you to take that experience and start fresh on your own? And what drives you and your mission at MAG Partners?
That's a loaded question. So I'll start by talking about my experience in the public markets. I am a builder at heart. I started in economic development on the government side, was given access to a wide array of projects in New York City, and that opened my eyes to the possibilities of how building in a city like New York can change the life of a city. And I knew that this was almost a calling for me, that I was hooked and knew that this is what I wanted to do. Doing it for 23 years at Forest City, I went through different periods where the public markets were friendly to development for a long time. Post-financial crisis, that was not the case. And I would lead analyst calls where we would talk about the operating portfolio quarter over quarter, and we would report our leasing progress, and then we'd get to the development pipeline, and there would be frowning, pushback, and as if development was a dirty word. And it became clear to me that the long-term value creation proposition that I was deeply committed to was waning in the public markets. And there's a reason for that, right? The Forest City was a public company, but not a REIT. As companies went the way of a REIT, it's very important to get in that REIT box. And the amount of development you have in your balance sheet is problematic if it exceeds certain agreed upon percentages that the analysts think are risk tolerable. And so I saw the future and said, my days of building so many different types of buildings over the course of my time at Forest City were going to be very different in the future. And I was the CEO, but I realized I was going to be the CEO of an operating company that had a little flair of development, as opposed to a development company that kept and operated everything it built. And it was at that moment that I knew it was time for me to leave. But I was committed to leaving in the way that I served at the company, which is with dignity, respect, and support. And so I went to the board and said I wanted to move on, and I wanted to do it with their support. And I don't know where I had the audacity to think as a young, well, maybe not so young, but as an experienced woman developer without a family dynasty behind me, and no capital behind me, that I could launch a development company. But when I did it, I took 10 able-bodied, very talented people along with me, and I said, we are not going to dial back the ambition. We want to build a company that can leverage all that we learned in building these large scale projects in the public markets. And we're going to show that you can build beauty, you can create value, and you can do that not just for your investors and your partners, but for the communities in which we build. And in doing that, we're going to do it with a group of people that look something like the city we're building in, which is diverse
Hmm.
uh, in every possible way. And so I think I had this idea. I think I was blessed with not getting the fear gene. So I don't think that I spent a lot of time focused on the all the things that could go wrong. I really focused on the fact that there was a need for this. There was an imperative that this work continue, and I felt like we were as good as any group to do it. And so that was the inspiration for the company. And I think we're very mission based. We understand we're supposed to make money and deliver profit for our investors, our partners, and ourselves, but there is a way to do it while at the same time respecting community and delivering beauty.
Right. New York City, especially just outside of real estate in general, being a cutthroat and an industry that's resistant to change. You did all this in a very male dominated industry. How has that kind of shaped your experience, your leadership style, and the culture you've been at Mag Partners?
Well, let's start with my makeup, the way that I'm hardwired. I don't think I ever got that note or that email that said you should be intimidated if you're the only woman in the room. I think from a very young age, I took my work very seriously, and I felt like if I had a job to do, I was supposed to do it.
Mhm.
And so I probably, started with this idea that I knew that I was supposed to perform, and my commitment to excellence really trumped everything, including feeling uncomfortable. I think it also mattered that I was able to go through the business in a meritocracy. Bruce Ratner really picked the best man or woman for the job. And there weren't a lot of women, but I was there, ready to serve, eager. Again, not with my eye on the corner office, just with my conviction that what I was doing mattered. So Bruce Ratner having my back, there being a fairly level playing field inside the company where it was all performance based. And then as you become more senior in any organization, people really follow the rules. And if I'm in charge, even if I was the only woman in a room full of 25 individuals over and over again, at some point it doesn't matter much because if you want to get the job done and you want to work with the company, you're going to basically fall into line. So I think I'm blessed also with really good siloing. Like I'm a really good compartmentalizer. So do I think that people said things and thought things about me and my role? Probably. But I think that I was able to box it out and stay focused on the fact that I was good at what I was doing. I had the support of my CEO, and the work was really mighty and important to me. And so all of that, I think, really lifted me in a way to allow me to do what most of us want to do, which is just to be given fair access
Right.
to do the things we want to do. And so, on top of that, I love being underestimated. I think it's one of my superpowers, which is to take all of that underestimating and garner it and deliver.
Right.
And so it's great when you are really an odd duck because people think that perhaps you're not advantaged and that you are going to come up short. And so the underdog syndrome has worked really well for me. And I think being a woman in this business, and I say this to everyone listening, women are inherently good at development. It is tying up a lot of loose ends. It is collaborating. It is bringing a lot of disparate parts together and making sense of it. There's nothing about being a professional woman that would suggest that you can't figure out how to excel at that work. So I'm a big believer that it's well suited for women and men.
I love that. You've often spoken highly of your time at Forest City Radnor. Obviously, some of the most influential years in your career as you grew in leadership. How has that time at Forest City Radnor informed your approach to leadership and strategy at Mag Partners? What lessons from that chapter still guide you today, and in what ways have you intentionally chosen to evolve from that legacy to build your own identity as a firm?
So one of my great mentors, Bruce Ratner, had a philosophy that the people that were going to be good at the work we were doing in Forest City were people that had served in public service. And I was an urban fellow, and I did work under Mayor Koch and Dinkins. And that experience of sitting on the public side and understanding what the government gets out of large scale development in a city like New York was really important training for the work at Forest City, because that public private partnership needs to have some level of respect, understanding, and equilibrium. So Bruce really used the government as a recruiting ground for the talent that he sought to bring in. And so when I was faced with this opportunity to move from the public side to the private side, do some of the same work at scale, and do it and maybe pay back my loans and earn a better living, I really was able to have my pick because I met every developer. And I can't underscore how government can provide an unbelievable entree for students into the world of public private partnerships. I would also say that going to Forest City and learning the business on the private side was an extraordinary experience because of the run we had, like the cycle that I managed to step into, where if you are what you build as a developer, and I believe you are, to have built some of the most iconic projects in all of New York City in the modern era while we were there, the New York Times building, New York by Geary, Barclays Center. If you build one of these great buildings in a lifetime of a developer, you should be lucky. And to have had the ability to do those buildings, and above all, to build residential, commercial, hospitality, and even an arena. In a life of a developer, the only way to know how to do that, Michael, is to do it. And so in your program, you will all be set up for success by having skills that will allow you to learn the business of building. But development is one of those businesses where no matter how beautiful your credentials, that your resume could be an object of beauty, you could have schooled yourself since the cradle in learning how to be a developer. The only way to lay claim to knowing it is by doing it. So that means that deal flow, the cycle you find yourself in, the the bandwidth of the company, the appetite for building, all has to line up. And I just feel extremely fortunate that for me, I hit it at the right time, and it allowed me to unleash a portfolio of buildings with an incredible group of talented people that I was part of.
So, as you know better than anyone, especially in New York City, it's a very interesting time to be a developer. You have serious headwinds in capital markets, construction costs are through the roof, interest rates are sticky, and equity has been a lot more selective. But you've been able to lead MAG partners in delivering projects through a tough cycle, which speaks to both your discipline and your long-term vision. Given your experience leading companies through challenging cycles, how do you approach capital formation and risk management in an environment like this? What has changed most about the way you structure deals or underwrite these types of projects?
That's a great question, and it's a very timely question. So, no capital, no company. As an entrepreneur, you learn that. And to complicate matters as a developer, you know that to build anything of scale, you need a balance sheet. The lender's going to look for that balance sheet. So when I left the public company, I was concerned that people are just so glib about saying, of course, you can do this on your own. And maybe I was a scarecrow without the brain, but I was very determined to demonstrate that I could build the same high quality buildings on my own by using the balance sheet of my capital partners, and not take a single capital partner in that would wed me to that partner forever and a day. And so we, in the three buildings that you mentioned in New York, the almost 1,000 units that we've built, we have very deliberately capitalized each and every one of those buildings independently. And we've done it in the face of extraordinary headwinds, not just COVID, but as you pointed out, the capital crisis, where when interest rates double, it changes your pro forma markedly. And so we have three unbelievably high performing residential assets in New York City. The capital that sits behind those assets had to pivot, had to be nimble, had to be resilient. And so the way we put the capital together is different for all three buildings. And it wasn't the conventional GP, LP, you're chasing promotes and you're good to go. It was highly structured equity. It was pref equity. It was maybe more debt than we wanted. And so I'm excited for the credit party to be over. Everybody wants to lend you money. And what we have seen, and this is interesting, just since the end of summer, I have seen capital formation change. I've seen people engage with us because we have an amazing pipeline in front of us. We have seen folks coming in and looking for conversations around GP and LP capital. That's different than the way it was 2 years ago. And so I'd say that the two buildings we just opened are extraordinarily successful. I wouldn't want to capitalize those buildings the same way on my next building because I can do a better job of bringing in true equity, which in the business model of the developer just rewards performance and outperformance in a much better way.
Right. And to your point, you've spoken a lot in the past and recently about the importance of patient capital, and I think you can best sum up the your Turtle Bay and Mabel capital partners as being very patient and believing in your investment thesis, believing is in you as as a developer. How do you cultivate that patient capital both internally and externally with your partners?
It's something I think a lot about, particularly since I have in my capital stack a number of headline investors. And I call them headline investors because when we wake up in the morning in the current world we live in, the one thing we can count on is headlines, like big ones, bold ones, like seismic ones. And so I have come to appreciate that foreign capital from very far away has a very difficult time managing conversations around tariffs, around Liberation Day, around war, local politics crashing into federal politics. These are things that I have never experienced on a day to day basis. So much whipsawing. Where I've written white papers on all of this. I've had to lead a master class in taxation in the state of New York, which is to say, a mayor alone cannot upend the tax system. It comes out of the state. But like teaching all of this in the time of upheaval and crisis has been exhausting and has led me to believe that my favorite meetings are the meetings where the capital comes in and says, to my question of tell me how you feel about local politics, tell me how you feel about Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
The answer I favor most, and the one that has the nickname, is the one that says, this is New York. If you can deliver a site like that with a return profile of the one you're showing me, um, New York has a housing crisis. You would never overbuild this market, even if you wanted to. Yes, mayors come and go, and they may freeze affordable rents, but the market is the market. And year over year, college students in this country want to be in cities like New York, and New York is always, the number one choice for young urban professionals that want to prosper in urban environments. And so, we are a country of cities and more people living in cities than ever in the history of the world. And I believe that the staying power of New York City is alive and well, and that people will write New York City's obituary as they are in the face of this election in the coming weeks. And in some ways, I welcome that because the scared capital, the timid capital, the inexperienced capital will move out of the way, as will those developers, and everybody will start saying it's over. And those of us that know, mostly because I've been around for 4 decades, we know that this obituary has been written over and over again, and the playing field gets clearer. The people with convictions are the ones that move forward, and I'm happy to be on that team. And so it's not that there aren't challenges; there are always challenges. But I would bet on New York over and over again, as I have, and I would bet on other cities and other locations as well. And I think aligning with capital that sees it that way is so important because this is not something you can force. If you force it, I think you will live to rue the day that you created that partnership.
Very well said. And to your point, New York, despite insanely strong demand, continues to struggle with affordability. It's clear that the city's policy tools haven't fully caught up to the scale of that challenge. You've mentioned in the past 45X and other, among other programs that have been implemented that were meant to unlock production, but in many ways, it's had the opposite effect. Most recently, you've been very vocal about the flaws of the 485X program, how it's constrained the ability to deliver new housing for New York City residents, especially mixed income products. What's your take on where 485X went wrong, and what kind of policy framework do you think would better balance affordability goals with financial feasibility?
I think the program should be torn up and I think it should be redesigned. I don't think that's going to happen.
Mhm.
So I have accepted it. And what we've done, I always say we hacked it. What we did is say, look, we know what this program can do, and we know what it can't do. It can deliver bits and bobs of housing to the scale of 149 units or less at a time. So we're taking large sites where we normally build one massive building and we're breaking it down. What does that do? That creates challenges of timing, so speed to market, challenges around efficiency of construction and efficiency of operation because you're duplicating so many tasks that want to be concurrent in the constructing of the building
Yeah.
and the way you operate an asset. So I find it super unfortunate, but until it changes, it's the hand we've been dealt. And because there is this insatiable demand, what we have decided to do is to put the component parts together and say we're going to build 6 buildings instead of 3 buildings.
Mhm.
And that's unfortunate because it's the ultimate workaround. But what we do know is if we know how to build it and we deliver it on time, we will see the rents we need to make the investment profitable. And so I think it means that the timeline for addressing the crisis, a crisis which every candidate, every mayoral candidate for the first time in the history of the city that I've been paying attention to politics agree exists. Like we would have candidates that would disagree that we need a housing policy that encourages more housing. At least every candidate understands the crisis. So therefore, they with that is an understanding that the government can't do this without the private sector. So if that remains true, if the city remains safe, because I think that's an existential issue, right? The city has to feel safe for people to stay here.
Mhm.
And we, as the development community, are willing to be innovative, creative, and partners to the government. I believe, again, I'm a little engine that could. I'm not trying to put 5,000 people to work, right? I'm basically saying that I believe that I have $1 billion pipeline of housing that can be built over the next 5 years in this city. And it'll take longer and it'll be harder to do, but it is doable. And that is what I'm planning on doing.
And I want to put a pin in that because I do want to ask you some questions about your exciting pipeline. But on the topic of this stalemate, it seems, with policymakers, what do you hope that the next generation of developers and policymakers will learn from this moment? Like, how do you ensure that the city remains economically competitive and inclusive for those who want to call it home?
So I'll tell you what I think each sector has to do. I think in the private sector, we need to have a makeover of the industry. I think that we have hurt ourselves because people think that real estate developers laugh all the way to the bank, do this with absolute disregard to the people they build for and the communities they build in. And the work of a developer is really important to a city. And somehow that reality has been warped, contorted, and spoiled by a small few. And I think those of us that are in it for the right reasons and understand the importance of the built environment to the life of a city need to proselytize. We need to build companies around this sense of purpose and mission and responsibility. So I think the more of us that do it the way it ought to be done, it'll help. I think we need to dial back, the rhetoric around developers being shady characters on the Gold Coast of New Jersey, in questionable circumstances with like bags of money. Like that's ridiculous.
Mhm.
But the caricature of a real estate developer just is not very positive. And so I think that the more folks that do it the way it ought to be done, it'll help. On the public side, politicians need to learn real estate math, which, as you know, is not that complicated. They need to be open to the possibility that not every real estate project makes money and that the chilling effect of a flawed program will hurt everyone. Mostly the constituents that need the housing. So I have always been frustrated because I know that a pro forma is not a complicated thing to explain. And this idea that there's some voodoo and that the developers gaming the system. Again, I'm not saying that that hasn't happened. I'm saying that what the public sector has to recognize is that there's a way to understand the economics around a real estate project. It's just not that complicated. But when I would sit with politicians, there was a resistance to doing that, because then it might actually require an intellectual conversation, maybe a little bit of economic analysis that demonstrates that the programs that were passed in Albany don't work. It's not that hard to appreciate that, but this idea that we're not going to engage, I think is outrageous. And I think if you have politicians in Albany that are maybe more center based, are more focused on what constituents need, balancing that with a responsible and responsive development community, I think you have a partnership that can produce more housing at a better pace than what we're currently going to see.
And having started your career at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and then transitioning to private development, you've really had the benefit of sitting on both sides of the table. And you've seen how public private partnerships can either unlock incredible outcomes or collapse under the weight of competing interests. From that perspective, what makes for a truly functional relationship between public officials and private developers? And how do you ensure that these partnerships produce something that serves both the city's vision, the community's needs, while at the same time creating value for your investors?
Another great question. I think it starts with competency. If there's a lack of competency, it's deeply frustrating. I'm not saying just on the side of government, but like the parties have to be competent. You have to know what you're doing. And the public puts a lot of trust in government officials, and those officials have to know not only what their job is, but how to do their job. Empowerment. So when an agency does know what it needs to do, it needs the backing and the support of the leadership at whatever level that leadership is. And so I think that that's really important. That's where mayors and governors and council members are really, really important. And then, developing a trust equation. And I don't want to sound naive, but I think that if you really think about it, this is the human condition. And I always say that the human element of our business is often overlooked, and it comes down to people. Before I build buildings, I'm building teams of people. I build people, right? So if we can focus on the fact that this is about a collection of humans that want to make a dent in the universe, in this case, make cities better, the people that are involved in this need to be in it for the right reasons. They need to know what their job is, and they know how to do it. And then proper policy, public policy, right, that meets the private sector where it needs to be. This would be an example of how 485X is not that policy. And sometimes a chilling effect where in 5 years, halfway through this program, somebody's going to do like a look-see and say, okay, look at the dramatic drop off. Look what happened because this program was put in place. We know from 2023 to 2024, there are now only 15,000, just over 15,000 building permits for housing in the city. And that number was in the tens of thousands just 5 years ago. So when you look at the numbers don't lie. So are we going to, as a collective, let the data tell us what this is doing and admit, hey, it didn't work. We need to retool it. We need to set it up for success. That's bold, audacious leadership, which I always advocate for, because this idea of breaking glass is really important in government. It's to break some glass and to figure out that sometimes the directions to life or things is on the outside of the box, not sitting inside the box and resting on your laurels.
Right. You bring up a good point there. Trust. You've often said that trust is the hardest currency in development. What are the ingredients that build and sustain that trust over the long life of a public-private project, or just a general relationship with these local governments, especially when political winds shift, there are elections and other leadership changes midstream?
So I think Warren Buffett is the one that said, what do you look for in an individual when you're building a company or building a project? And it's I think it's three things. It's intelligence, curiosity, and integrity. And if you don't have the third, the other two can be very malicious.
Yeah.
And I think that those three characteristics are central to building trust. I've had amazing examples where when I was building the highly controversial Atlantic Yards, which was rebranded to Pacific Park, I'll never forget that Tish James, who has moved on now, and she's in a different realm, but she was a councilwoman, and she really, really did not like the project. And I never gave up building trust with her. And I'll never forget that we toured some of the buildings we had built in Brooklyn. We toured some of the housing that we did deliver on. And while she constantly felt like we were coming up short, and by the way, we may have, but there were reasons for that, and they were not all in our court. But I'll never forget when she stopped and said, "You know what? When I grow up, I want to be you." And I realized that I had done something
Wow.
by making it really difficult for her not to like me and trust me, even though she didn't agree with me.
Mhm.
And that is, maybe not a great example, but for me, it's an example of how you can win people over with trust, even if you see the world differently. And I was able to have rational conversations with her. We were able to talk through issues and come to a common ground because I knew where she was coming from and she knew where I was coming from.
I think that's a lesson that can be replicated outside of real estate in general. So thank you for that. The so the two projects that we discussed earlier, the Anagram, Turtle Bay, and the Mabel, were are both beautiful buildings, and delivering those two buildings, ground up projects in New York City over the past few years, is a tall task. And those two buildings really stand out as examples in how you weave design, purpose, and community impact into your projects. Can you walk us through the vision behind them, these two buildings, and how they embody MAG's philosophy of making good places?
I want to write, the cheap airport novel around each of those buildings because every building has, 1,000 stories. And, from a unit count point of view, they're quite similar. They're on two different sides of town. One is tall and thin, the other's like long and wide. And we started the groundbreaking on the same week and we topped them off on the same week. So I've created this competitive ecosystem between the two buildings with the teams, whether it's UAG, the contractor building it for us, or DE, the team that's leasing it. We have like face-offs where who leased more units this week, and whoever does gets dinner with Mag. So we've had a lot of fun because what's interesting is when you have two, it's very rare that you have these two very similar buildings, but they have different personalities. They've got different design intents. They're both beautiful and they're both high performing. So I love that embedded in each of these two buildings are so many stories, and the stories really are about possibilities, which is it's not formulaic. So let's go to West Chelsea. So we're building on these rolling meadows of the Penn South Cooperative, which is a group of folks, over 5,000 folks that own a piece of this Kennedy era affordable housing complex.
Mhm.
And they knew that to keep their complex alive and well, they needed to invest in it. And to invest in it, they decided to put one of the sites into a process to develop it. And so it was a great privilege to be picked by over 5,000 cooperators to build a new building. But it also meant that the issues around building this building in their haven, their safe haven, their sanctuary was going to require a lot of tender care and feeding. I think we won the job, Michael, because when you build an arena at the confluence of some of the finest neighborhoods in all of New York, there's no issue too small. We hosed down the truck tires of every vehicle that came off of that site, and that was to stop particulate matter from getting airborne. When you do that at the scale we did it, under a camera, where if it didn't happen, the call went up to Albany, there's no question that's too small or too complicated to answer. So all of that managing of quality of life issues, of look aheads, of look behinds, what could we do better? Exactly what time of day is that construction fence coming down? Like we're good at this. And so I say we really are good at the quirky. So if you have a lot of people that ask a lot of questions about a lot of things,
Mhm.
and you're a developer, you need to be set up to be able to answer those questions. We're really good at that. So we took down a really derelict building inside of their complex, which had like a famous tennis bubble. I knew every real estate player that played tennis because they all called to get the exact date that the bubble was coming down, which is really a sign of how few tennis facilities there are in New York City, and then a really randy supermarket that needed to go. And we've replaced it with this beautiful building. And this building is a passive house building. And we thought the scale of this building, the geometry of this building, the fact that it's part of this cooperative, this was the right place to do it. And with Rick Cook, we went on this mission to build passive house. I think there are only 12 truly certified passive house buildings in New York City, which is sad, but I understand why.
Mhm.
Because the standards at which you have to build, the triple pane curtain wall, the appliances themselves, all of the conditions that are necessary to receive that certification are expensive. And so we managed that budget. We had to keep it as an adult because we didn't know if we were going to be successful. Rick Cook once told me that in his office, this building is the building of choice because all the architects in his office wanted to work on it versus a $25 million private home because the architects in New York City, all living in Brooklyn, want to see more passive house. So I realized that as hard as it was, so many people were rooting for us to be successful with passive house. And then after we finished it, we're so proud that we could build it. We have this precedent of naming buildings when possible after unsung women heroes, and Ruby is named after a beater, a fashion beater that was living in Harlem, went to FIT, and never really got proper recognition for her talents and her contributions. And we went to the family estate and asked for permission to name the building after her. So unlike a lot of developers that name buildings after their children, we are trying to do something different. And so one of the most enjoyable things about building buildings at MAG Partners is we sit around and think, what do we want to name this passive house building? And we found out through research that a woman was the co-founder of the Audubon Society, and that was Mabel. And now people are talking about Mabel in ways that are different because we've helped her get some credit where credit was due. And so Mabel is a sanctuary. Mabel is passive house. Mabel is contextual in West Chelsea. We cross town, we go over to 50th and 2nd Avenue, again, where there's just so many stories, fun, but stressful at the time, of assembling land in New York City on the corner of 50th and 2nd Avenue and what that takes. I'd say a very long beginning, but that building is really drafting in behind a high quality program of luxury and affordability in units that are sized for professionals that are working differently today. BK Eske is the architect there. It is contextual as well, but like the avenue over there has a lot of glass and steel, and I'd say buildings that might not be the best looking examples of what we can do in our field. So I think we built a gorgeous building. It has a prominence on 2nd and 5th Avenue that's unquestionably serving it well. We were successful in getting a restaurant, Serafina, to lease the entire ground floor before we even opened the doors of the residential component. And we're going to be doing room service. So people who live in Anagram Turtle Bay are able to call room service as a sort of hospitality feature, because let's face it, we're all in hospitality now.
Right.
So that you can have your fish delivered to your door, and you're not going to have to call DoorDash to do it. You can call your neighborhood fish market, which will be located and nested inside of this amazing Italian restaurant. And then moreover, we have outdoor space, we have greenery, we have light and air, because we know that post-COVID, these are the great luxuries. And so that's another feature of MAG Partners, just to really celebrate the outside space, the vistas, the rooftops. And then lastly, you'd be hard pressed not to notice that in all of our buildings, we have oversized closets, because I think we, we're women who say, like, what are some of the issues around living in New York City? Space is the ultimate luxury. And so we build really beautiful closets, and those closets are good for men and women trying to put really 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag.
Right. So what's been the market reaction to these projects as they're in lease up?
So we hit our stride. We came to market in summer, which is when you want to in New York. We have been so pleased with the pace. You get so pleased with the pace that you have to ask yourself, are you going too fast? Because stuff's flying off the shelves. So I think the notables are that we're between $3 to $5 above pro forma, $3 to $5 a foot above pro forma on each of the assets, which means that the pricing and the cost of the units is exceeding expectations. The larger units are performing so well that I think I'm seeing a trend in New York City where it's bucking this idea that studio apartments drive yield. This used to always be the case. You build commodity product, you build it small and tight, and you make money. So we've been challenging that by saying we should do more 2 bedrooms. We should oversize the 1 bedrooms. And we often, even in the studio apartments, we will model those units because we do so many things that I think are clever ways to take a small space and make it sing. So I think that the unit layouts are so good that the market is rewarding us for that. The schedule and the pace of lease up is brisk enough where we're pushing pricing, but we're not being greedy. Like we're being long term holders of this asset. And we're seeing different clientele in each building. So what we're seeing on the east side is, I call it the 15-minute city. The people that work at JP Morgan or Citadel that want to wake up in the morning and they want everything that they care about, everything they need to do within 15 minutes of their front door. And you can deliver that in a building like Anagram. And we brought back Turtle Bay because young people, maybe people like yourself, some people don't even know that Turtle Bay was a neighborhood.
I didn't until I had done some research on it.
So we're bringing that name back because it's so beautiful, and it was born of this idea that there were just pocket parks all over the Upper East Side with turtles in them, and Turtle Bay became this name. And we love the idea that we're bringing Turtle Bay back again, and people are talking about it. And it's really funny, when we started our Street Easy campaign, we were not getting a lot of hits from locals, and we realized that people who might live on the Upper East Side, because a lot of people are younger on the Upper East Side now. It's really changed the demographic. I laugh and say people move to the Upper East Side to save money so they can afford to move to Brooklyn. But in that cohort of people, young people were looking for stuff on the Upper East Side and didn't know that Turtle Bay is actually on the Upper East Side. So we've had to manage the fact that there's an awareness campaign associated with Anagram Turtle Bay, and now it's a fully formed concept, and it's alive and well, and it's all going better than planned.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, can you talk us a little bit about your upcoming pipeline? You have a lot of momentum behind Mabel, the Anagram Turtle Bay, and the Ruby. What's next?
I'm always building pipeline because that's how we keep the company growing and the portfolio expanding. And so these are long lead items, as you know. You don't just whip up a new project and go out and get it financed and build it. So we have been in the hunt, and always are in the hunt, but we've won some really good business, and we've done it a couple of ways. One is we're really good competitors. So when there are RFPs, we won't enter a beauty contest if it's open for everyone. But often we get invited into limited RFPs where the owner of the land or the institution wants to invite a cadre of developers in. That's where your reputation will serve you, because we score really high. We're like the little engine that could. So we may not be related, but we will compete with related because we've built the very same types of buildings. And so limited competitions where we get shortlisted and designated have produced some really incredible opportunities of scale. We are really, really strong with landowners who are not real estate people, who want to either keep their land in, or they want to ground lease the land to a developer.
Mhm.
And they really do think that developers eat their young. So you have to basically break through this conception that developers are not to be trusted, are not going to do the things they say they're going to do. Our reputation, when we say you could call over to our partners at Mabel, our partners at Ruby, our partners on the east side. So I think we are doing really well with properties that will never go on the market, because we are either making a joint venture with a landowner who wants to basically monetize their land holdings, and and recognize that real estate is the greatest hedge against inflation
Mhm.
and high taxes, that the benefits of ownership are so extraordinary that we teach them the tax advantages of owning real estate long term, tax aware real estate projects where we show the landowner, sure, you can sell this piece of land, but why would you? Can we show you how much more money you'll make over the long term if you keep it, partner with us, and build it with us? And I think our reputation allows us to actually have that conversation, and the numbers are boggling. Like, if you really believe in New York City and you really believe that we can deliver on our end, there's no scenario under which an outright sale is ever going to make sense for a landowner. So we have, as I said, over $1 billion worth of opportunity. Now we're out putting the capital together, and then we'll make the announcements as we have our house in order. But in that way, this is the advantage of being a rather small shop, which is I don't need a $10 billion portfolio. A $1 billion pipeline right now will keep me busy over the next 2 years. So that's what we're working on.
Exciting. I'm really looking forward to following your journey and seeing what's next. Um, and MaryAnne, as you know, this is a student-led podcast, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a question that was specifically targeted for some of our students and recent alums. So you've built and led teams across every phase of your career, and you've shaped a lot of very talented professionals and established professionals in the industry. Um, for young real estate professionals that are looking to build a successful career in real estate, what qualities do you look for in a candidate? And in your view, what truly helps someone stand out, not just on paper, but in how they show up and add value to a business?
I think as humans, it goes back to this idea that curiosity is a superpower, intelligence is important, skills, and then skills and intelligence and integrity. That really matters to me. And then when I think about the business of development, I think of it as a three-legged stool. Just because I've had to break it down in my head, people ask me this question like, what makes a really good developer? Construction. If you're able to really understand and become expert in construction, uh, marketing and leasing, if you can sell, you know, we're all selling something, and capital markets. So those are the three legs of the stool as I see them. And if you can really develop expertise in one of those three, you would be of interest to a developer like myself. And you had those human qualities that I deem to be important. Work ethic is also really important because there's been a sort of a sea change. When I came out of college, if I wanted to do something, I would just say to somebody, "Tell me what I have to do. Like I'll do it, whatever it takes." And I think that maybe work-life balance is become more important. And I'm not saying it's not important, but there is a way to have a full life. There's a way to do the things you have to do so you can do the things that you want to do. But if I meet someone and I start getting a sense that this career quest is one of a lot of things, right? And that this is going to have to get balanced into a massive life equation as a young person, it doesn't really work in our industry because I have one guy, I call him double exclamation point Adam, because it doesn't matter what we're talking about. He's enthusiastic, he's into it, he's going to jump on it, he's going to get it done. There are people out there that are going to do it that way. And so it's not a business for the faint of heart. And if really and truly you don't want to throw yourself in, and again, you're throwing your life away because I don't believe that you have to make these massive trade-offs. I went into a business and said, I need to make sure that if I have to leave my kids every day, it better be good. But I was on work, not just at work. And I was on work when there was very little flexibility. So I think that the human mind can be very ingenious and very creative. And there's ways to work and work smart where you can have a healthy family life and you can raise your children. And the reason why it's worth it to me is we are in a business that is not pushing paper and buttons. And so when you want to explain to your daughter, this is what I did every day, you get to point to the skyline or the ground plane, and there's a physical manifestation of your toiling. And what better way to teach work ethic and teach purpose and passion to our children? So I think we are blessed in this profession with the tangible. And the tangible eludes a lot of people. I meet lawyers who have worked on my deals and they've never even been to the site or the building. So we, as the builders, are holding something very precious, and that means that we need to recognize it. You need to love it. And then you need to say, wow, to do this, I'm going to have to pour my heart and soul into it. But then I get to share it with others that are important to me. And it's an everlasting gift that you can give your family because it has such meaning. So I don't want to, like, I'm hopefully not overstating what a developer can do, but an urban developer can lift a city if done properly. And I think that's reason to work really hard and to pour yourself into it. So I would encourage people to do that if it really is what makes you tick. So the last thing I'm going to say is know thyself. Know thyself and don't try to be something you're not. And this is a business where if you need your life ticked and tied every single day, at the end of the day, it all has to be tickety boo. This is not for you. Because the best real estate developers are the ones that can go to sleep at night knowing that there are just thousands of things that are floating that have not been tied together yet. And the magic is figuring out how to bring them all together. But it's not that way most of the time. The brilliance is when it happens, and that's when you create the magic. But you need to be able to deal with that. And so I'd say, like, not everybody can and should be a real estate developer.
So well put, MaryAnne. Thank you again for coming on to the podcast and for sharing your insights, your perspective, and your story with us.
Well, I look forward to seeing all the great things that you're going to do along with your class. And when you're down my way, I do want to hear from you. And I wish you the best. And I thank you for your interest in hearing from me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Meet the Visionaries podcast. And be sure to tune into some of our upcoming episodes as we have some very exciting guests slated for later this fall and into the winter. I'm Michael Khamis, and I'll see you next time at the MIT Center for Real Estate.